Hello, everybody. How are we doing tonight? Welcome to tonight's training. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Ashley Perl, and today we're going to talk about people-pleasing and perfectionism. And I'm really excited, as you can tell, to talk about these topics because I myself have gone through a very massive healing journey with my own people-pleasing and perfectionism, things that I didn't even know existed in my life until someone kind of brought it forth and made me realize, oh, there's so many ways that this is showing up in my life. And so tonight's training is going to be so jam-packed, and it's going to have a lot of great info. You might want to grab a pen and paper to write some things down. My intention is for this to be around 15 minutes, maybe 20, but we'll see how we do. I ultimately just want to be able to provide as much information that will be supportive to all of you on your journey. So get comfortable, say hello in the comments if you're here, and let's get started. So like I said, my name is Ashley Perl. Aside from being a recovering people pleaser and perfectionist myself, I am also a somatic healing coach and a breathwork guide. I got into this work because of my own personal journey of finding peace and fulfillment and happiness through exploring some of these elements within myself. And now I love to support women and men with anxiety and with finding more fulfillment in their relationships and overcoming things like people-pleasing and perfectionism and other patterns and behaviors that are taking away from people's ability to feel present and happy in their lives and in their relationships. So tonight we are going to essentially go over what even is people-pleasing, what even is perfectionism, how to maybe self-identify. And so I'll invite you to self-reflect a little bit, and this is where I'll invite you to have self-compassion, okay? Once we do that, we will kind of explore what are the negative impacts that these behaviors might have, that these patterns might have in your life. And then we'll explore how these patterns even came to be in the first place. And then from there, we'll get to probably what you're most looking forward to, which is, okay, we have this information, now what do we do about it? Okay, so let's define these terms, and you'll notice that they're actually kind of related. So maybe if you identify with one, you might identify with the other as well, and that's okay. So let's start with people-pleasing. People-pleasing, or a people pleaser, this is a common term that we hear now often, is generally someone who prioritizes everybody else, focuses on appeasing everybody else, and puts everyone else's needs before their own. So I'll go through some examples and then you can reflect, does this resonate with you? So one of the biggest examples of the people pleaser is the yes person. The person that is afraid to say no to anything. Yes to social engagements. Yes to favors. Yes to anything that anybody asks. And there's an element of like frustration or exhaustion in their own life, right? Saying yes to everybody else, putting themselves on the last on their to-do list. And it's possible that there's even some expectation or some resentment that builds up because other people aren't showing up for you the way that you're showing up for them. So that is just like, yes, the yes person, okay? The next way that this shows up is the chameleon. And a lot of these are sneaky, you guys. So really self-reflect here. The chameleon is the person who can shift and change into whatever other people feel most comfortable with them being. So perhaps you're in social situations or you're at dinner with your family and it's just easier to say yes and to agree with everything as opposed to really speaking your mind and speaking your truth, self-expressing in an authentic way. And this can be seen, like a lot of these traits you'll find, as a positive thing. You know, oh, they can go into any group and get along with anybody, and that's beautiful. That's the gift of this. When it's in the distortion of this is when that person is just constantly not being true to themselves to the point where maybe it brings up anxiety or just these feelings of like dissonance in their system. So that's the chameleon. The next way that this shows up, and it's kind of related, is the actor. And so the actor is kind of like the chameleon in that the actor just plays the role that everybody expects them to play. Maybe you resonate with this because you went to school and college and got a degree in the exact same thing that your father and then your grandfather and every single person before you did, but you actually would love to do something completely different. But you're playing this role. Maybe you're wearing things that you just feel like you have to wear. Important words to pay attention to here are, if you ever say you should, I should do this, or I have to. Notice where that comes from. Who says you should? Who says you have to? And what is the feeling inside of you when you think about going against that thing? And so those are some elements of the people pleaser. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but let's now talk about how can this behavior negatively impact your life, your well-being, your happiness, your joy. And so at the very base of this, there's an element of inauthenticity. When we're people pleasing, when we're constantly saying whatever's going to appease anyone else, saying yes when our body's actually saying no to something, when we're feeling stressed because we feel like we should do something, that doesn't feel authentic if your body's saying one thing and your mind's saying something else. And so that element of inauthenticity can actually create anxiety in the body. It can actually create a sense of dis-ease or even health issues. Things like this really do creep up in our systems because that element is going to build up, that element of saying yes all the time when your body maybe is simply depleted, or you're simply tired or too fatigued to even care for yourself because you're last on your priority list. The other way that this can negatively impact you is in your relationships. Perhaps you are saying yes to everybody and so exhausted that by the time you get home and you're talking to your spouse, your husband, or your partner, or whomever, a friend, you have nothing left in your tank. And maybe there's even resentment build up or frustration. And who's going to be on the receiving end of that? Probably someone close to you that you would like to treat a little bit differently or better. And so again, self-reflect with compassion here, okay? And where does this people-pleasing behavior even come from? And we'll get into perfectionism as well, but they're both they're similar. All patterns that we do that are causing some sort of like riff in our lives, it's a behavior that's subconsciously created, a personality trait that's created often during childhood to protect you in some way because of potential harm or potential discomfort or even a fear. And let's also acknowledge, it's important to acknowledge that doing things for other people, because I know there are people listening to this who are like, but I love doing things for other people and, it's so good and we're supposed to do mitzvot and all of these things. Yes, absolutely. However, are you doing things to the point of abandonment, of depletion, of frustration? We'll get into some more self-reflection questions here, okay? It's important to self-reflect, at the level that you're giving to others, are you still feeling resourced? Are you still feeling resourced, or are you feeling depleted, anxious, fatigued, exhausted, like you have no energy for yourself or your family or your work or whatever? Consider that. There's an archetype that I see often, which I call the martyr mom. The martyr mom. She does everything for everybody, and it's beautiful. And in the same thread, it could actually be really harmful because I think we'll come back. All right, here we are. Thanks for sticking with me. My Instagram likes to tell me when I'm on for more than 30 minutes a day, and I always forget on these days where I teach that I have to turn that off. So as I was saying, get to self-reflect. First question, are you feeling resourced? I was beginning to talk about this archetype of the martyr mom, or the person, martyr dad, the person who does everything for everyone, but then builds up some frustration or resentment that comes out in ways that actually aren't supportive. So you get to reflect, is the more loving thing to maybe take some time for yourself, to, find a sitter once in a while, or to get support so that you can also feel resourced. The second thing to reflect on in the realm of people pleasing. Do you expect others to act a certain way, to treat you differently or do something for you because of what you do for them? AKA, are you just living with expectations that people are consistently not meeting? And what does that do for you, right? What does that create in your life and in your relationships? Do you expect love? Do you respect, or do you expect something in return because of all the things you do for others? And if that's the case, lovingly self-reflect, okay? What need are you trying to meet here? And is this the healthiest way to do it? And then the last thing to reflect on is, do you feel like, for the most part, your mind and your body are in sync? Meaning, when someone asks you to do them a favor, if your body's saying no, do you actually say, sorry, I can't? Or do you always override your body's wisdom by what your mind thinks you should do or need to do to fill in the blank, uphold a certain something, standard, whatever? And are you really preoccupied with what other people think of you? Because if you're really preoccupied with what other people think of you and let that drive your decisions, it's likely that you're doing things to appease others, okay? So that is like a very high level, but also we went a little deep into people pleasing and getting curious about where might you see these patterns in your life in the distortion. So now let's get into perfectionism and how this is similar. And then we'll get into what do we do about it now that we've self-identified how these patterns might be playing out in our lives. If you feel comfortable sharing in the comments what you're noticing, any aha moments or things that you're just now realizing, please share, because you sharing is going to help someone else realize, oh, wow, that's actually me as well. And oh, wow, this isn't just me. Because everyone has some element of this. And the more we can be open about it, the more we can heal it and bring it to the surface, okay? So perfectionism. Perfectionism is this drive to feel and appear and be and create things that are perfect. To have this persona of perfection, which we can acknowledge, right? Like perfect is actually a standard that doesn't exist, that it's never met. So it's just something to be aware of. Perfectionists are often people who have excessively high standards for themselves and for others. They're often very critical of themselves and of others. And there's this element of it's just never enough. We got to go to the next thing and get the next thing, okay? And just like people pleasing, there's a gift of this. To have high standards and to hold yourself to a very high degree is a beautiful thing. And if it's to the point where you are constantly feeling not enough, or like you're just always going to try to reach the next thing, then you might be in the distortion. And how can perfectionism impact your life in a negative way? Well, if you have high standards, not just for yourself, but for others, and you're so critical and you're so rigid about your way of living and your way of going about life in general, it might push people away. You might feel difficulty, discomfort, anxiety, stress in your system because you have just created this life where nothing's ever good enough or where you're not good enough. And you get to really decide like what's important to you in this life. Are you going to be so results oriented that you don't even enjoy the journey? That you blink your eyes one day and maybe you look back and you're like, wow, okay, I'm, the head of this company, or I'm this, or I got this 1 million awards and whatever it is. But inside you're still feeling like, no, that didn't really do it for me. There's a reason why certain people get to the top and still don't feel fulfilled. And it's because, especially with perfectionism, we're trying to meet this need for self-worth and for fulfillment and for enoughness through so much that's outside of ourselves, when that gets to come from within. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So I'm going through lists of why perfectionism, or how it can negatively impact your life. So the enough, not enoughness, all of that. Often this shows up as all or nothing thinking, black or white thinking. And these people think of themselves as a failure if they didn't, if something wasn't perfect. And I keep using air quotes because perfect doesn't exist, okay? If we haven't caught my drift yet. But it's like the pursuit of perfect that keeps us feeling stuck or not enough or whatever it is. And if we have this all or nothing thinking, black and white, we're always going to be hard on ourselves. And the sneakiest one, the one that I find and I see in all my clients and even in myself that shows up, you might be like, whoa, this is one, procrastination. Sometimes the fear of something not being good enough or not being perfect enough before you even begin stops you from even beginning in the first place. So if there's that, career that you want to try, or something, a creative endeavor you want to start, or in my case, a podcast I wanted to start, it took years to even do it because I thought of all the ways that it wouldn't be perfect, and that stopped me from even doing the thing. And I can tell you that it's brought me so much joy, and all of my creative endeavors, all my career changes, all the things have brought me so much joy. And it took me releasing control, stepping away from it, like acknowledging that perfect doesn't exist, and that the pursuit of your passions is most important to actually do those things. So just a little side note there. Perfectionism can be sneaky, and it's very unique because our society actually puts, perfect people on a pedestal, or the perfect life. With the rise of social media, we have so much kind of fake, or like the highlight reels to constantly compare ourselves to. And so if we feel like we always have to be striving to be perfect, to have the perfect family, home life, to have the cleanest house, to have the perfect body, whatever it is, to have the perfect communication and relationships, it's like there's no room for the human. There's no room for the messiness of life. And that's just not realistic. And so the reality is that this way of thinking is actually ridding so many people of joy. It's ridding so many people of the pursuit of their passions and their goals. It's ridding people of meaningful connection and happiness and presence in their lives. So maybe you resonate with one or the other or both. Stick with me. We're finally going to get into how does this even happen and what do we do about it? Okay. So basically, in both cases, maybe you've seen my trainings on a little bit on internal family systems and parts work and how parts of us are created. And ultimately, both of these behaviors are like protective mechanisms that proactively protect us in some way. And they're often created when we're young, when we're in childhood, to again, protect us in some way. And so there's often a need that we're trying to meet through either the people pleasing or the perfectionism. Quite simply, we're trying to, at the primal level, avoid pain and seek pleasure. But what happens is that we're so overly identified with these parts of ourselves. The overachievers, the straight A students, the accolade, or the person that just does everything for everyone. They're so nice and they're so kind. Again, it's beautiful. We want to be doing these things for people. We want to strive to be our best, but not if we're operating in the distortion that pulls us away from being present and joyous and happy and fulfilled and content in our lives. So let's hold in on people pleasing. Often, if we're doing everything for everybody, or saying yes when we really mean no, or just appeasing everybody, overriding our body's natural wisdom, it's because there's fear there. There's a fear of, what if I say what I truly mean? What is that person going to think of me if I don't say yes to picking up their child 5 days a week? And what's the community going to think of me? And all of these things. When we start to think of I should or I have to, that's when we get to get curious of, are we operating in a distortion? And there's a real intrinsic motivation of being that yes person, people pleasing. At the most primal or survival level, we're afraid to lose love. We're afraid to lose community. And our primal brains are, I go like this because it's like the lower brain, but it's our primal survival mechanism that's trained for survival, but it's on overdrive now. So many people live on overdrive to the point where their bodies literally think if they say no to somebody, it's like that person's going to hate them. And then it's literally a fear of death. And so I share this because that's actually how our primal bodies work. And having this awareness can help us kind of position ourselves a little bit separate from the situation and realize, wow, I don't have to do this at the cost of my own health and well-being. I often see empathic people, highly sensitive people. These are people I love to work with, and they just naturally, end up being the people I work with, because this has been me. A highly sensitive person can feel so deeply the like rejection or perceived disapproval of others that they will do whatever it takes to avoid that. Again, avoid pleasure or avoid pain, seek pleasure. And it's because we feel like that pain is too uncomfortable to be with. However, we can shift this. Okay? Let's get into perfectionism. So perfectionism is similar, but it more so comes from like a fear of judgment or a fear of possibly losing love. And if you're someone who grew up with a family where you had to stick out by getting good grades, or you got attention by what you produced and what you gave and how perfect your grades were and how good of a student you were, that's often where a lot of the perfectionism is created. You will likely continue to seek, self-worth and love through external things, through accolades, through whatever's next to your name and your, career or whatever it is. And I talk about this stuff kind of like nonchalantly, but it's because we get to normalize it. It's these patterns are common, and we get to shift it if it's not in your highest good, if it's not in service to you and your highest good. So, okay, the time has come. What do we do to actually overcome this? And this isn't just like, okay, just, journal and there it is. Like, this is a journey. These patterns have likely been with you for years and years, if not decades of your life. And so it's going to take intention in order to shift them. So let's start with number one. Number one, you've likely been doing it on this training already. Kudos to you. Is to self-reflect. Self-reflect and really look at, your patterns and your behaviors. How might these be showing up in your life? And then the most important part, how do you actually want to show up? How do you actually want to feel? And so some examples of this could be, I want to show up and support other people in my life, but still feel energized and resourced to show up for my family and my friends or whatever it is. Maybe you want to be able to contribute to the world and create things and do these creative endeavors from a place of excitement versus like rigidity and this idea that it has to look and feel and be a certain way. Perfect. So number one, self-reflect. Like, where are you on this spectrum? And you get to do this with kindness and compassion towards yourself, knowing that these behaviors have been with you for a long time. And it's common in our community. It's common in the world today, okay? Number two, identify what need you are trying to meet by playing out this part, this behavior trait. What is this perfectionist afraid is going to happen if you're not perfect? What is that people pleaser afraid of? What is it afraid is going to happen if you don't continue to appease everybody? And once you figure that out, and these are subconscious things, okay? So often it takes working with someone. For me, it actually took a dear coach and mentor of mine that I worked with for years to finally bring it to my awareness, because it was so sneaky. It even went over my head. I didn't even realize that that's what was driving me, that was my motivation. And so getting curious around like, what might be the need here? It's likely love. It's likely we have core needs as humans. So there's a few core ones, but that's the second step. And then once you figure that out, once you've figured out like, what is the fear here? What am I actually looking for or wanting to avoid the loss of? Then this is where you get to show up for yourselves and self-resource. And it's easier said than done. And this is a lot of the work that I support people with on a somatic level, on a body-based level, because we've learned to live life from up here, but we actually need to resource our entire bodies. And that's a process. That's a journey, okay? Number four, and this is probably the most important, is learning to feel your feelings and learning to like observe your life. Because if you're trying so hard, your mind doesn't think that your body can handle discomfort. So if we're trying so hard to avoid potential loss of love, or we don't want to hurt anybody, and of course we never want to hurt anyone intentionally, but sometimes we have to hold boundaries that are supportive to us. And that's kind of like, number 5, which I got ahead of, but is figuring out what is of highest service to you and ultimately everyone around you. because you're of best service to everyone around you when you're resourced, when you're in your like truest, highest, authentic alignment. And so upholding boundaries that are going to protect your energy, that are going to protect your values, that are going to protect the way that you want to show up in the world. All of these together, and it's a balance and it's a journey of figuring out like how to actually be with maybe the discomfort of saying no for the first time, how to put something out into the world that you feel like maybe isn't perfect, or, have people over and okay, your house isn't completely, shining and clean, but it's okay because it allows you to have people over and you get to enjoy time with friends and family. Like you get to figure out what is most important to you and how can you protect those values and live in alignment with that, as opposed to the rigid rules that you've maybe set out for yourself or have learned from your witnessing, your parents or your grandparents or other people around you. So there you have it. People pleasing and perfectionism. There is so much more we can dive into here. And if you're looking for support with this, I would love to support you. If you can't tell, I'm very excited by this topic because I see what's possible for people when they begin to prioritize themselves, their well-being, and it actually has a bigger ripple effect on the world in a positive way. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you for joining me for this training. We have another training coming up in a couple weeks. We're going to be focusing on healing intergenerational trauma, which is a topic that I'm very, very also passionate about. And if you're someone who even has grandparents or even parents who are survivors or who are maybe immigrants, and you're curious about how maybe some of the things that they carried with them are showing up in your life and the way that you present yourself in the world and how you get to live and be present in the world, I highly recommend tuning into that one and check the other ones that we've done. I've done quite a lot on here, and would love to hear what you thought of this training, any aha moments. And if you're looking for support, reach out for one-to-one with either myself or any of the other amazing practitioners on this platform. It is incredible, the OK Clarity community, and really grateful to be a part of it. So have a great rest of your day or night or morning or evening, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time.